we are the co-creators of our lives. And if we're not happy with the lives that we're living, instead of focusing on the circumstances and blaming others or blaming God, this is just the life God gave me and I just need to suffer through it until I get to heaven. No, that is a lie from the pit of hell. There's a difference between living a life of choosing gratitude, living a life of grasping for gratitude versus living a life of embodied gratitude. Time heals jack nothing. Time does not heal anything. Time just lets that thing that you're not processing settle down into the bottom and fossilate into your soul. I threw off this burden that I was putting upon myself, and I came back to the simplicity of what my responsibility was. There's always tension in an intentional life, but that is the cost and the pain of growth. And a lot of people are settling for the cost and the pain of decay and destruction. We love labels like ADD and ADHD, but the reality is a lot of what we're medically diagnosing is the result of really bad habits. A lot of women are overloaded, overstimulated, and their lives are filled with obligation. And all of those things get in the way of living a really simple life. Hello, hello, hello. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so happy to be here.
And for our friend who's listening, they're probably like, wait, where's Mariah? Where's Bethany? And who is this new face or who is this new voice? So I want to introduce to you guys a new friend. Mariah is still very much a part of the podcast. Beth is still very much a part of the podcast. Nobody is going anywhere. Bethany is having some family emergencies this week that she's tending to, so she's not been able to join us, but I reached out to Mariah and Mariah was going to do 2 of those episodes with me. And then I reached out to Claire because last week, not your last week, our recording last week, Claire was here and we recorded a beautiful episode with Claire where she shared her story and her journey of living beautifully. And we're going to be sharing that with you in January, but she did so great. It was so fun to have her on the podcast. The conversation was so rich and honest and hopeful that I thought maybe she'd be willing to come back and do another one. So I reached out to you on, was it Sunday?
Yes, Sunday.
And I was like, hey, podcast emergency. Are you able to fill in? And gosh, Claire, your response was so gracious. You were like, I'd be willing to move things around, but I can't.
Oh, yeah.
Normally, I'd be willing to move things around to make this work because I want to be there with you guys. But one of the 3 scheduled times worked out for you to join. So we moved some things around on our end and we made it happen. So here she is. And you guys are really in for a treat. So what do you think would be good for our friend to know about you, since this is basically your guys' first introduction to each other?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm Claire, and I'm very happy to be here. Love your guys' podcast. I've listened every week, and it's been pretty much a highlight in my week. And I think I want to say I'm just a normal girl that is on the journey. And I was so blessed for you to come into my life. And I'm thinking of last week's episode about you're talking about having a mentor in your life, and you've become my mentor. And I stuck with the process, and my life it's blossoming, and not in this fireworks explosive type of way, in this like slow, steady way that I'm learning to really appreciate. So I'm just so grateful because being on here is something I never thought I would do. It's something I've always wanted for myself. So I'm grateful to be on the journey with you guys, and yeah, to be a part of it today.
Thanks. I can say, I can genuinely say this. I really believe Claire's going to become a true friend of the podcast. And I think that you guys can expect to be seeing her face and hearing her voice pretty consistently in the new year. We'll probably have you back every now and then because you're just she's become a good friend of mine. We journeyed together as one-on-one coaching through the coaching program for about a year and 9 months. and she just launched out, but there's a beautiful friendship that's also blossoming between us. So, yeah, and I just love this woman, and I know that you're going to fall in love with her too. Yeah, thanks for being here for part 2 of our 4-part Christmas series inspired by I was praying about Christmas time. I was praying about December, and I was like, "Okay, Lord, this podcast is a well for weary women." I'm always like, what's on your heart? What do you want us to talk about? What does she need to hear? What's going to help her get through whatever she's going through? And I felt like the Lord just reminded me of how difficult the holidays can be for so many women. I know, Claire's a hairstylist, an incredible hairstylist. She does my hair, which I'm getting done on Monday. So you work with women, and you probably hear it just as much as I did in working with women when I was working as a receptionist in hair salons. But women, when they talk about the holidays, there's a
Yeah.
lot of dread around it, a lot of exhaustion and
Yeah.
overwhelm around it. And there's this narrative that is just almost mass consciousness amongst most women where it's like, I just want to
Yeah.
get through the holidays.
Yeah.
So I felt like the Lord was like, speak into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so last week, part 1, we talked about stillness, needs, and boundaries. It was a juicy episode. There was a lot of good stuff in that episode. And this week, the 3 mindfulness practices are going to be gratitude, simplicity, and presence. So I wanted to ask you, Claire, was there ever, we're just going to
Yeah.
jump right into it. Ready to
Yeah.
go deep with me
Let's
quick?
do it. I love all the things, all
was
those topics.
Was there ever a time in your story where you felt like gratitude was impossible? And not the performative type of gratitude that we do. Oh, I'm thankful for food and I'm thankful for a house but like the embodied, the feeling of gratitude felt impossible.
Yeah. I have to say, thankfully, I feel like even through some of the darkest seasons of my life, I've had a little bit of gratitude. And sometimes I think that was like the thread that I was holding on to that kept me going. I could find sometimes even just one thing to be grateful for. And the hard circumstances and emotions and everything were kind of sitting on top of that. But yeah, and it's hard to sometimes think of those things we're grateful for when we're weighed down by life struggles, but I could always find something little, which I'm very
Mm,
grateful for that. But it's hard, and
yeah.
it didn't make anything better. It didn't make my day much better. Sometimes it felt like 30 seconds, and I'm very grateful, to be on my journey with Jesus. Sometimes that's all I could think of at the time. And there's so many things we can be grateful, but that was my main one, and I was like, "This is messy and ugly, and it's not what I thought it would look like, but I'm glad that I'm in his life, he's in my life."
So it sounds like in those seasons, it was more of gratitude was something that you were grasping
Yeah,
hold of instead of really
yeah,
embodying.
yeah. I don't think I knew how to embody it. I didn't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
How okay, for someone that doesn't know what that looks like, how would you explain what embodying gratitude looks like?
Well, I think I can totally relate with you. I've always, no matter how hard or dire circumstances have been, there's always been something that I can be grateful for, whether it's my health, whether it's my family, whether it was simple
Yeah,
stuff. I'm thankful that I'm not starving in a third world country, right? I mean, we're so blessed and privileged
yeah,
in the West. Like there's so much to be grateful for. But I think for a lot of my journey, gratitude was something that I would grasp for, or even like I was more performative. I was choosing gratitude because I know I
mm,
should be grateful. I remember my mom bought me this pillow probably like 9 years ago, and it said, "There's always, always, always something to be grateful for." And I think it was her little subliminal. I
Yeah.
love my mom so much. She was helping me because I was in a really depressed state. Life was really painful. I embodied at that time a lot of pain. I embodied a lot of disappointment. I embodied a lot of self-doubt. When I talk about embodiment, I talk about this is your mode of operation. This is your
Yeah.
baseline state of being. And so I didn't embody joy. Did that mean that I'd have moments of joy? Yes, I could experience moments of joy. I could grasp for things to be grateful for. But living in a state of gratitude and joy felt unreal for me. I thought people who lived like that were fakers. I was like, you guys are liars. No way. I remember questioning my mentor because the mentor that I've had a relationship with now for 10, almost 11 years, she's just always joyful. And I'm like, this woman's got to be lying to herself. How is it possible to just be joyful always? Right. So I think that's the difference. For me is gratitude is something that we can grasp for. We can choose to be grateful because we know it's a good thing to do. And maybe even on a guilt level, we feel like we should feel grateful for the
Yes.
things that we have. But I know that there's a difference between living a life of choosing gratitude, living a life of grasping for gratitude versus living a life of embodied gratitude, where gratitude becomes your normal perpetual
Yeah.
state of being. It's a feeling that you feel on a daily basis. It's your new
Yeah.
emotional norm. Can you relate to that after going through the Living
Yeah, and it
Beautifully
makes
journey?
me so emotional because 2 years ago, I was in a really hard place in my life, and that was right before I started the one-on-one coaching with Tanya, and that's when I was grasping onto gratitude and really struggling, and through this journey, I can say now I live in a place of gratitude almost every day, and even just for example, not going into so much, but over these last 2 years, I've had some health things where it's become a big part of my life, and it can affect, like, your energy and going to work and stuff, and I've had days where I woke up, I felt pretty good, I had really good clients, the day went smoothly, and I felt good, and I sit in my car and I literally wept because the day was
Mm.
I was just so grateful for having energy and good clients and a job and food in my belly, and it makes me think of something that you taught me in coaching. It's like a web. You're grateful for this and this and this and this, and once you can, like, start thinking about that, they come, and so now you're thinking this way, and you feel it when you start just sitting down and looking at how many things you can be grateful for, and it has changed my life, and it's not like this every single day, but it's more days than not, when beforehand, it was very few days.
Yeah. Definitely. No, I remember when there was a time for you, Claire, and I mean, and I've shared my story with my singleness journey here and how I was not thankful to be single, and now I'm so
Yeah,
thankful to be single. But same for you. There were circumstances in your life that you were not grateful for. They felt like
yeah,
curses, they felt like burdens, they felt like, "Why is this
yeah,
happening to me?" There was a lot of
yeah,
overgeneralization, right? This
almost
is a never-ending pattern of defeat. It's never gonna end. It's always gonna be this way, and dread around it. But then those circumstances haven't changed. And yet now you're so grateful
yeah,
for those
'cause
circumstances.
every circumstance, now that I know the tools of self-reflection and the art of remembrance and looking into things more deeply, in almost every circumstance, I can see the silver lining or take something from it where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that was so bad, but I am better in this because of it. I now know my needs and my boundaries because they were so crossed in the past, and I didn't know them." And I could go on for forever.
That's so good. I think for me, one of the mantras, not to be weird or new agey or anything like that, right? But it's a mantra, is a thought pillar that you reflect on and you meditate on and you remind yourself of. It's an anchor of truth that I think really help you build those chains of new ways of thinking. But for me, it was when I heard somebody say, life is happening for you,
Yeah,
not to you. And it made me think of the verse in scripture that says, God is working
yeah,
all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. So I heard it in a more new agey community. Life is happening for you, not to you. But when it made me think of that scripture passage, it was like, that statement is true. I do love God and he is working all things for my good. And so shifting my mindset around difficult things that I was navigating, painful things that I was navigating, and looking at it through the lens of, this is happening for me, not to me. It started to help shift me out of that powerlessness and out of that victim mindset. And I started to show up with a sense of purpose. Like, okay, how can I partner with what God is wanting to do in me through this thing that is happening
yeah,
for me? It was a
yeah,
game changer.
definitely. I even asked myself last night in this one circumstance, because I wasn't doing this, but something changed last night, and I was sitting in my car, and I was like, "What am I supposed to be learning from this?" And it
Mm.
changes things. I feel like it changes things in your body as well. It changes things in your mind, in your
Absolutely.
body, and yeah, it took the dread out of the heaviness of
Yeah.
that circumstance that I can't change right now.
How do you think that the hurry and hustle culture gets in the way of people living in a state of gratitude?
Mm. It's crazy because the hurry and the hustle culture has become so normalized. I see it at work. I see it in elements of my life. I see it with my women. Yeah, I think with gratitude, sometimes if it's not coming naturally, it takes intentionality and time. And how can you be intentional when your life is literally hustling from the moment you open your eyes to the moment you go to bed? I feel like we can be so on and thinking about the next, thinking about the next. How is gratitude going to fit into that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're always thinking of the next thing to do or the next thing to accomplish or the next thing to obtain. And that becomes our state of being. And you can't truly be content when you're constantly focused on
Yeah.
what's next. You can't, and we're going to talk about this later, but you can't even be present when you're always thinking about what's
Yeah.
next. When we're thinking about what we have to do and what we need to do and what we want to do, it robs us of gratitude because that that future focus often is paired with the perspective of lack,
Definitely.
right? Not enough time, not enough resources, need more, need to do more, need to be more, need to show up more. And so that in and of itself stands against the practice of learning how to be content in all circumstances, which stands against the ability to really learn how to embody
Yeah.
gratitude. And that doesn't mean that uh we can't have goals for ourselves. That's not what I'm saying. I am a woman who really believes in growth and going after what's next, but I'm not compelled to do it from a place of lack or urgency or because my value or my worth or my identity is connected to those things. Right? I go after the next thing because I believe that God creates us and calls us to keep growing with him and to keep expanding his kingdom within us. And then your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's motivated by something different. It's not motivated from lack and scarcity. It's motivated from abundance and peace
Yeah.
and rest. So I agree. I think it's impossible to live an embodied life of gratitude when we're living from a place of hustle and we're living a hurried life. I had another question that I thought you would be brilliant to speak into because of your story. How do you think unresolved grief impacts gratitude?
Yeah. You kind of correctly explained me at the beginning very much. Why is this happening to me? Pretty much like a victim mindset. I had unprocessed grief, actually, multiple things in my life that I hadn't grieved. And I really tried to stuff them away. But in learning that, I had a lot of sadness, a lot of mourning in my body of, if this hadn't have happened, what would my life be like? How would it be different? I wish that could have been different. And also in that, because of that consuming mindset, I also didn't have much space for gratitude. It makes me think of this thing. I don't know if you remember, but maybe it was back in high school or something, and it was in a movie or something. And it was a quote where people would say, "Well, at least you have legs." Anytime someone had something hard in their life, someone else would be like, "Well, at least you have your legs." It almost felt like a Band-Aid. Like, yes, oh, I'm very grateful to have legs, but it kind of just put like
That's like so dismissive. Well, at least you have air
yeah,
in your lungs. Yeah, and the life that I'm living absolutely sucks. So how grateful am I for that air in my
yes.
lungs? But we do that,
Yes.
don't we? It's like, well, look for the silver lining. Well, it could be worse. Oh my gosh, I hate that when I was going through the trenches and I'd be like, and this and this and this. And it's like, well, so many people have it so much worse than
Yes.
you. No, never tell anybody
Yeah.
that ever, ever. That is the worst thing you can tell a soul. But we do that ourselves, Claire. I hear women say it about themselves like, oh, I'm struggling with this, this, and this, and this, and this. And it's all real things, but they're not letting them feel any of it. They don't let themselves feel the disappointment or feel the discouragement or feel the pain or the heartbreak or whatever because they tell themselves, but it
Yeah.
could be worse. It's like a form of self
It
gaslighting.
is. It is. Yeah. It's just putting this big fake Band-Aid on it that's gonna come off the moment it gets wet or the next thing happens. It's like, you gotta process that grief. You gotta feel those emotions. Like,
I think we're gonna do an episode in the new year on grief, probably not in January because who wants to start a new year off talking
yeah.
about grief? Grief is something I'm so
Yeah.
passionate about, and we recorded episode 3 of the series yesterday with Mariah, and I talked about this there too. I think it's coming up because a lot of people are struggling with grief at this
Yeah.
time of year, and they don't know it. I just heard of someone who attempted to end their life, and that happens a lot around this time of year, and it's worth mentioning. It's worth shining a little bit of a light on because our friend who's listening might have grief in her heart bubbling up and she might not even know
Yeah.
what it is or where it's coming from or think, oh, this happened such a long time ago. I should be
Yeah.
over it by now. Um, and time heals
Yeah.
jack nothing. Time does not heal anything. Time just lets that thing that you're not processing settle down into the bottom and fossilate
Yeah.
into your soul. Time will change you, but not for the better. Learning how to process these hard things, learning how to sit with them and feel them. And we have to do a deeper episode on feeling also, because I think part of why we don't grieve is because we don't want to feel all of the emotions that are
Yeah.
connected to grief, and we'll get stuck in the bargaining. If this hadn't happened then, right? Or if I had tried better or whatever, or we get stuck in the denial. I'm not
Mhm.
affected by this. I'm fine. We don't want to feel the anger. We don't want to feel the depression. We don't want to feel the despair. We don't want to feel all of those other things that come with loss. And uh, because I think a lot of the time women are afraid that, if I hear this a lot, and I used to feel this way myself, if I really let myself feel the extent of this, it's
Yeah.
going to destroy me. But that is such a lie from the pit
Yeah.
of hell, because the thing that's actually destroying you is that you're not letting yourself
Yeah.
feel. The only way to heal is to feel, because everything that we're not letting ourselves feel, it doesn't just go away. It gets stuck in our
Yeah.
nervous system, and it makes us mentally, emotionally, physically, relationally, financially, spiritually
Yeah.
unwell. So if you do have sadness coming up, I would encourage you, you don't have to let it swallow you up, but you can give yourself some space. You can give yourself some space to just feel it. We think it's going to come in and take over, but it doesn't. It kind of comes up and then it moves on. Once you let it up and you let it out, it moves on. And it's crazy because you will feel so much lighter and even brighter. And then there's more space within you to receive the
Yeah.
good things.
Yeah, I can attest to that because it's so true. You kind of go through it and it flows, but I'd like to just break it down for the woman who doesn't even know what that looks like, because that was me. And
Yeah.
I would be like, what does that
Mm.
even mean? So,
What did you learn?
yeah, if I could paint a picture, it was me sitting in my bed. I was very sad about X circumstance. And I thought, okay, I'm going to think about it instead of not thinking about it and trying to cast it out of my mind. I'm going to focus on it. So I literally sat there and focused on it, and ugly crying, weeping, sometimes almost shaking. Wherever my mind went with it, I would let it go with it. I stopped fighting. I think that's the thing, is like we try to fight and block and karate chop our thoughts, like go with those thoughts. And yeah, literally in 20 minutes, I was like, what's for lunch? There is an element of like, you feel it and it doesn't consume you. And I feel like your body goes and then it kind of comes back down. And I remember many times of feeling better afterwards, instead of the opposite, where I would sit there and get on my phone or put a grateful band-aid on it or try to push it away. And it's like, oh, I loved your analogy of the whack-a-mole game. It's going to come right back up. And then all day would be my day off, and that thing would be popping up in my mind. And next thing I knew, I had a really bad day off. So, yeah, if you could just sit there and just don't fight, just try it. All I had to do was try it once, and it changed everything for me.
Yeah. And I think this is where it really is helpful to have somebody in process with you. Not to put in a shameful plug here, but you had a lot of resistance around feeling, because your autopilot programming, your nervous system was wired to
Yeah.
just avoid. whether it was through busyness, through distraction, through toxic positivity. Your nervous system was like, avoid, 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 avoid,
Yeah.
avoid, right? You were also a chronic overthinker. You were a ruminator because, as you learn in Living Beautifully Life coaching, overthinking is a
Yeah.
symptom of underfeeling. So if you're a chronic overthinker or a ruminator, it is you tattletaling on you that you are not feeling the things that you need to feel in order to get it out of your body. And I remember having that conversation with you where you came back and I was like, no, girl, you need to just sit with it. You need to face it. You need to be with it. And then when you came back the next week and you're like, I did it. I did it. And it wasn't even that big of a deal. But I think sometimes when we're doing these things that on some level we really do believe it's going to kill us, we really do believe this thing is going to take me out. If I let myself go here, I'll never come back from it. It helps to have that person in process with you who can not only tell you, no, that's not true. And okay, let's work through that, but is going to be there to help you navigate this new way that feels really scary and unfamiliar for you. So that's where working with a really good faith filled forward focused counselor comes in handy or
Yeah.
working with me.
Work with Tanya.
So, so good. I feel like we're going to come back to the whack-a-mole, but let's move on to simplicity. And again, they're all kind of connected. And for more on gratitude, go back and listen to the episode from Thanksgiving week because we talked about gratitude as a
Mhm.
spiritual practice. We talked about how it affects us psychologically. We talked about how it affects us physiologically. Literally, your amygdala is the part of the brain that it's an emotional part of the brain. And you literally cannot feel anxiety and gratitude at the same time. Your brain literally cannot feel both emotions at the same time. So that Thanksgiving week episode was really rich, but I want to talk about simplicity because I think one of the patterns that I see in women in society, especially around the holidays, but just in life in general, is that we overcomplicate and we over busy and we overfill and overstimulate and oversaturate our lives. And that is one of the main reasons why we don't enjoy them, why we can't be present with them, why we aren't grateful, why we are feeling weary, why we are feeling disconnected, why we are feeling burnt out. So I felt like bringing up the mindfulness practice of simplicity would be a really good point to focus on for a little bit. So I wanted to ask you, Claire, how did you used to overcomplicate things in your life that you've now learned how to let go of?
Big. There's multiple things. The first one that came to my mind was worry. Used to be a worrywart, worry about everything, which I feel like is kind of stemmed into anxiety, just which is like fear of the future, fear of the unknown, and worrying about the present. And yeah, so maybe even if I did have a circumstantially simple life around me, it wasn't simple because my mind was not simple. It was so scattered all the time.
So good. I'm working with a client right now, and this came up a couple of weeks ago. Oftentimes, when we come from really chaotic backgrounds in childhood, our nervous system becomes addicted to the
Yeah.
chaos. Chaos gives us a sense of control and well-being, even in dysfunctional romantic relationships, like women who have only ever known emotionally unavailable, toxic, even maybe abusive, withholding men where it's just on again, off again, or you can't come to them and talk to them. It's just a lot of escalation and chaos in the relationship when a woman will get into a relationship with an emotionally available, stable, consistent guy. A lot of women, and you see this in the dating shows and stuff, they don't know what to do with that. They're like, we don't have the spark. We don't have the chemistry. He's not man enough for me. And it's because their nervous system is used to something toxic. Their nervous system is comforted and has a sense of control in chaos. Kids who come from chaotic backgrounds that are in the foster system get put in a home of peace, they will create chaos because chaos is what feels familiar in their nervous system. So a lot of the time we think life is so chaotic, but we may not realize that we're the ones creating the chaos because at some level, as much as we want to bicker about it and complain about it and tell everybody how miserable life is, at some level, this is literally what you're choosing for yourself and you're choosing it for a reason. It's because you're getting
Yeah.
something out of it, or you got something out of it at one point and now it's just become your perpetual
Yeah.
state of being. And the question is to ask yourself, what is it costing you, and is this really what you want to continue to choose for yourself? Now some people might think, I'm not choosing chaos for myself, my life is just chaotic, and let me give you a big list to justify that. Honey,
Yeah.
you are. We create chaos for ourselves, and oftentimes, again, it's from a super subconscious, unconscious place. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it. But we are the co-creators of our lives, and if we're not happy with the lives that we're living, instead of focusing on the circumstances and blaming others or blaming God, this is just the life God gave me and I just need to suffer through it until I get to heaven. No, that is a lie from the pit of hell. You were created as a co-creator, and you are empowered by the Spirit of God to co-create a life that is filled with peace and joy and love and connection and intimacy. And this is meant to become your perpetual state of well-being. Chaos is not your portion. So if you're living in a chaotic life, this is not to shame or judge you. I lived in a chaotic life once too. I mean, hello, if you haven't heard my story yet, let me just remind you that I went through 2 marriages and 2 divorces in 3 years. I was in a mental hospital for wanting to end my life. I was diagnosed with PTSD, PMDD, anxiety, and depression. I was in a highly chaotic state. So I'm not saying this to judge or shame or point fingers or blame. I'm literally saying this to invite you higher. Like Claire said, hustle and hurry is the way of society. There is another way. There is another way. And that's what living beautifully is all about.
I have a question for you because it's something that I struggled with. If you could think back to that chaotic time of your life, and then through your work, you start transitioning into a calmer, in my words, a boring life. I was petrified of living in my mind, a boring life. How did you get through that and choose the boring, not boring?
Claire, I don't think that part of my hardwiring is so part of your hardwiring, part of the way that God created you is that you have this thrill for
Mm.
adventure. I love a good adventure. I'm not going to say no to an adventure, but I don't have that same drive that you do for it. So I don't think that I ever struggled with that personally. I don't think that I ever was like, "Oh my gosh, life is so boring now." So maybe you're the one who can answer that question because there probably is somebody else who's listening that can relate to that.
So I was thinking about it as you were speaking, like, how did I get through this awareness? And I had to change what my expectations were. That was really big for me. I had to accept my season of life was a little bit slower paced. And every time it would pop up, and I would be like, this isn't what I want. I would think about it. I would practice presence and stillness, think about it, and like, what is good for me right now? Yeah, I may not be on this wild adventure today, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be in my future. Like, don't have the all or nothing thinking. I think I really liked learning about the seasons of life. That helped me a lot. And I think
Yeah.
just kind of breaking it down, like, Yeah, you can have a few years of a particular time, a few bad years. That doesn't mean your whole life is gonna be that way.
Yeah. And let's not call
Yeah,
them bad years,
yeah,
right? I wouldn't call them bad years. I would call them challenging years, pruning years, refining years,
growing.
but I wouldn't label them bad. But yeah, definitely. I think too, I think the more well, two things that came to mind with your personal journey was we first of all, the more that your central nervous system healed, the more that you started really living in that parasympathetic state of rest and digest. You weren't so anxious all the time. You weren't so easily triggered all the time. Once you started tasting a life of peace and rest and centeredness or connectedness with your heart, that started to feel more and more good for you. And then you started to want to protect that. And then the other thing that I thought of from your journey was in the beginning, adventure for you was a form of
Mm,
escapism. And I think that the more you started to develop your ability to face the difficult things that you had been for your whole life trying to run from, the need to escape or distract or check out began to
yeah,
dissipate. And what was really beautiful in that was that this really beautiful part of you, this facet of you that you inherited from your bio dad, but for adventure and the thrill of exploring, it didn't leave you, but it became purified because you were no longer grasping onto it out of brokenness. This is a part of me that connects me with my dad who's no longer in my life. You let that go because you worked through your grief and you came to a point of acceptance and you could embrace this beautiful part of you as an inheritance from your dad without putting all of your
mm,
identity onto it because it was your way of holding on to your dad. And then also because you were able to face the hard things, you weren't constantly and perpetually daydreaming about the next adventure as a way of checking out from the difficult things of life. And so, even right before you launched, you had gone on a trip with girlfriends and you shared. I loved it. I had a great time. I was so present, but I wasn't there to check out. You can still enjoy this genuine part of who you are and how God made you, but you can enjoy it more fully because you're not being driven to it through a place of brokenness or escapism. Does that make
definitely.
sense?
Yeah,
Did I explain that well?
spot on. Yeah. Like, in the healing of my heart and soul and spirit came the peace. The chaos settled and the peace came, and yeah, you learn to love and appreciate that and protect it, and you now I make sure my schedule makes room for stillness, room to process. Comes gratitude,
Yeah.
and so it's a
Yeah.
priority now.
Yeah. So life was overcomplicated for you in the sense that you would worry about things and you had it because your nervous system was overcharged by a lot of the grief and difficult things you'd gone through that you'd not processed. That was the stuff that tended to overcomplicate life. But for you, it sounds like just being able to like work through the grief, being able to get to the point of acceptance, learning how to think about things in a new way. All of these things helped you get to a point where you could simplify life and actually lean into the simplicity of it and embrace the simplicity of it and not feel like you had to fill yourself with stuff to do. Cause I put down here like a lot of women are overloaded, overstimulated, and their lives are filled with obligation. And all of those things get in the way of living a really simple life. The sweetness of simplicity is beautiful. And that doesn't mean that we can't live a full life. It's more, I think for me, when I say simplicity, I just mean it's a state of being. it's not overthinking everything. It's not worrying about things. It's not constantly trying to do the most. It's not overextending
Wow.
myself. It's living in a place of acceptance and contentment and presence and protecting moments of stillness and not feeling like my value is connected to my productivity or my achievements or what other people think of me. I'm not talking about minimalism when I talk about simplicity. It's a state of being.
Do you feel like you have this in your life?
I think so. I think I like to keep things simple, but sometimes I do feel like every now and then recently I have a new mentor that I'm building relationship with. And in our first session together, I was sharing with her some of the pressures I was feeling with building Living Beautifully and, bringing in some teammates and wanting to create income for them because we're all just working for free right now, and all of us could use some income. And and but what she helped me to see was that like God hadn't asked me to do that. Like God hadn't asked me to provide for these girls.
Wow.
And the responsibility was not actually on my shoulders to do that yet. Not that it never will be, but that wasn't a responsibility that God had placed on me. That was a responsibility I had put upon myself. And it was starting to feel a little bit of a burden and it was starting to put a little bit of pressure on me. And that was starting to show up in how I was relating with them and the expectations that I was having of them. And so I think in that, I got caught up in feeling this pressure to perform and produce in an area that God had not put responsibility for me to do. And once I was able to take that off and just simply go back to what is the last thing God told you? What's the last thing God told you to do? He said, speak more. That's why we're doing podcast. He didn't say produce more income. He didn't say create a new course. He didn't say start being a start being a provider for these two other women who are going to be partnering with you. He just said speak more. And so when I threw off this burden that I was putting upon myself and I came back to the simplicity of what Jesus had told me to do, what my responsibility was, there was a lot of peace in that. And ever since I did that, this was probably about 3 weeks ago that I was struggling with this. Gosh, there's just been so much more peace and joy in what we're co-creating together here at Living
Wow.
Beautifully. So, and even in my own life, because I'm not filling my downtime with trying to strategize ideas to produce income. Like I'm just going, no, like God hasn't called me to do that. I can actually rest right now. So even with simplicity, I would say, ask yourself, what season am I in? And what is God asking me to take on? Sometimes we take on responsibilities because of cultural influence, because of societal influence, because of our own identity issues where we're seeking to we're trying to show up in life in a certain way because it's who we think we should be. It's what we think is expected of us. And I think for me, anytime that I start to feel that burden or that pressure, it's me tattletaling on myself that I've stepped out of the simplicity that Jesus invites us into. And that doesn't mean that everything is easy, but it means that there's a measure of ease in
Yeah.
everything.
Wow. Wow. That's so good. And it's like because you could step back and you observed your thoughts and how you were feeling, you were able to see the truth in it.
It's it's because I had somebody from the outside helping me see what I couldn't see because I was in the inside. This is why I say all the time, it's great to listen to podcasts and read books and watch YouTube videos. It's great to go to church on a Sunday and listen to a motivational speech, but we need people helping us look at the things that we can't see for ourselves. We need mentors. We need discipleship. We need those types of relationships in our lives. So it was that. It was talking about something I was going through and having her help me look at it at a way that I couldn't look at it for myself. And then it was also me being able to be honest with myself and self reflect and being able to just accept and let go of things and not worry.
So it's almost like part of a simplistic life, a peaceful life is prioritizing the right relationships. Also,
100%.
instead of, I think we
A
can
100.
spread ourselves very thin amongst maybe too many relationships, ones that aren't filling us, and we keep pushing to make it happen, maybe because we think we should. Um, yeah, that I feel like is a whole thing in itself.
Or we're out there trying to be who we think we need to be to the whole world at our jobs, at the kids' sporting events, we're out there trying to be who we think we need to be. And then with our family, with our closest friends, we give the worst of ourselves to them because we've exerted all this energy in a performance that we have nothing left to give the people that matter the
Yeah.
most. Yeah. And that's where you do that image versus identity work. Why are you feeling like you need to show up and project and protect this image of
Yeah.
yourself? And why are you not showing up in a way that you would feel better about yourself? Because it would be in alignment with your authentic self. So there's a lot to there's a lot of things that rob us from the simplicity that life offers. Very few people are living simple
Mhm.
lives. Most people you meet are struggling with a lot of different things and they're overworked, overburdened, overstimulated, ADD, ADHD. Like life is not
Mm.
simple for most people. And again, simple is not
Yeah.
easy. I'm not saying easy life, but that there's an ease in everything. What has helped you create a more simple life?
I think firstly, just being really intentional. And I think there was really a moment where I learned my identity and who I am, who I want to be, what woman I'm working at growing into. And once I realized that, you have to start taking action. And I started taking action with the things in my life and the people in my life. And it was not easy. There are some relationships that have dwindled, but there are other ones that have blossomed because of it. And
Um,
I had to have boundaries at my job. I had to uphold those boundaries. I had to have boundaries with myself. I had to uphold those. And it, like you just said, it was not easy and it did not happen overnight, but it was just like little bit by little bit, I was building this more intentional life. And in that, it felt more peaceful. Um, as my mind was healing. And each time you set a boundary for yourself and you follow through with it, it is the most healing, rewarding, fulfilling experience. And I feel like you are on that high for a bit. And I was like, I have to do this again. There's now this other area in my life where if I want peace, I have to do this. And it kind of created a simpler life. It's still many areas that I'm working through, but yeah, I felt more peace in areas than I've ever felt before.
Isn't it funny how the things that we have so much dread around and that we try to avoid so much because they feel so scary start to feel like addictive? You're like, oh my gosh, I feel so strong. I feel so powerful. And not in a prideful way, but in a confident way. I feel confident in myself. I feel capable
Yeah.
within myself.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
the old
so
girl
good.
wouldn't do that
Okay,
before, and now I'm doing that. Like, it's super cool.
right. Yeah. So, presence, not presents like gifts under the tree. Presence, like being in your heart, being in your body, being in the room you're in, being in the moment you're in, being with the people you're in, being in reality, not perceived reality. Presence. Not having a conversation with somebody and thinking about a million things that you have to do or haven't done or the things you want to say. Present. There's an epidemic in our culture. People are not present. There's studies out there that say that like the average human has the attention span of 8 seconds, and we see this in social media. We see this in the reels have to be so short because we lose interest and we move on to the next and we move on to the next and we move on to the next. And, we love labels like ADD and ADHD, but the reality is a lot of what we're medically diagnosing is the result of really bad habits. We are conditioning our brains to operate in a certain way, and it's not optimal. And it has a negative effect on every area of our lives, a negative effect on our spirituality, a negative effect on our relationships, on our ability to learn and grow and question things and contemplate. So, presence is probably one of the most powerful practices that you can develop in your life. And I would say that it is very much like all of these other ones that we're talking about, a spiritual practice. It's a practice of mindfulness. It demands intention, and there's always tension when you're living an intentional life because you're moving away from one thing that is normal and feels comfortable and familiar, and you're moving towards something that you don't know how to do and you're just kind of fumbling your way to. So there's always tension in an intentional life, but that is the cost and the pain of growth. And a lot of people are settling for the cost and the pain of decay and destruction. Presence is presence is going to directly impact your relationship with God. Presence is going to directly impact your relationship with your spouse or your partner. Presence is going to directly impact the relationship that you foster with your children. If there was one thing that I would say we all have to continuously develop in our lives, it is our ability to be present. So, at what point in the journey do you think you realized for yourself that you were not living a present life? Like, did you already know that about yourself, or is that something that you realized
I
along the way?
yeah, I didn't know, and I feel like I discovered it week 1, literally, like, I can remember it.
What happened in
We
week 1,
literally
Claire?
were doing, like, moments of mindfulness, and I was like, "Wow, I can't even be mindful for, like, 7 seconds," and I think that's very common. I hear women speak about that a lot. So from day 1 and beforehand, I was not mindful, I was not present. I think on the outside, I looked like I was, but really inside, I wasn't. How have you flowed through this? Were there moments where you were more present, times when you weren't? And what are maybe some practices that we can apply in our lives to help us kind of rebuild our brains and get there?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think I shared this in a past episode, but they say that oftentimes what is the catalyst for change in somebody's life is either desperation, we become desperate, or devastation. We're devastated.
Yeah,
Can you relate to
so
that?
much so.
So that was my story too. I was both. Like I was in a state of despair. I was devastated and I was desperate to figure out a different way. And in that state of overwhelm and overstimulation, I'd gone through a lot of abuse for 3 years. Especially in the last year, it was a very volatile and chaotic home life for me and my in both of my marriages, but especially in my second marriage. And I was in fight or flight. Like I was just but I almost got to the point where I just shut down because I couldn't do it anymore. So like your physical body started manifesting physical symptoms. My body didn't get sick. My mind was really sick, but my body just kind of shut down. It was like, we can't do
Mhm.
this anymore. I was brought to this point of like a forced stop. I don't even know if you remember this, Claire. So Claire and I used to work with each other. You'll hear more about this in her story episode. But there was a day at the hair salon. I was a receptionist at a salon she was working at. And this was my breaking point. I came into work. It was New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and then we were back at work. And I had had like a 48, 72-hour period of just high chaos at home. And I woke up that morning and something highly chaotic happened at home. And I had to get ready to go to work. And I got in the car and I
Mhm.
started crying and I couldn't stop. I drove all the way to work and I couldn't stop. I got out of the car thinking by the time I walk through the door, I'll stop, and I couldn't stop. I checked in, clocked in, and I couldn't stop. And it was mortifying. I remember feeling so much shame. It was humiliating, but I literally could not. It's like I just hit this point where I was like, I can't keep it
Yeah.
together anymore. I don't have the ability to keep it together anymore. And I remember Jewel looking at me, and I think Karen was there, and they were like, "You need to go home." And I was mortified because I have a solid work ethic, like to not be able to show up and do my job. And they were like, "You need to go home." And I remember calling my mom, and I'm like, I couldn't even
Oh.
talk. I was just crying and crying and crying. And my mom was like, "Where are you? What is happening?" And I'm like, I can't stop crying. And my mom was like, "What is happening?" Now, keep in mind, a year and a half before this, I was in a mental hospital because I'd wanted to end my life. So my whole family is on hyper alert because they're afraid that that's going
Yeah.
to happen again. And I remember my mom was like, "Stay put. I'm going to come and get you." And I was like, "No, it's okay because you don't want to be a burden, right?" Which I've given that up, but we all need to give that up. But we can all relate to that. Like, no, no, don't have any needs. Take care of yourself. Do what you
Yeah.
can. Don't be a burden. So I'm like, I couldn't receive the help. I'm like, no, no, I'll drive up. And my parents were living in Grass Valley at the time, which was probably like a 45-minute drive from Roseville where I was working. And I drove up to my parents' house. And I think the safety of my parents' home caused me to sink all the way into myself. And I didn't come out for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And that is where stillness started for me. It started from a really broken place of just not being able to do anything anymore. I couldn't. I was forced flat on the floor and I could not pick myself back up. So I think for me, it was a very unique experience. And then working with a counselor, and she would have me do a lot of reflective work. And so I got into this rhythm of every day. And this is where I do this now with my clients, where every day you sit with yourself in stillness and you practice being present. And I think, like you said, the more that you do that, the more that you rewire your brain to be able to stay grounded in the present moment. So I would say at this point, 11 years into the journey, I'm a pretty present
Yeah.
person, but it was It demanded a lifestyle change, and I was forced into that change because of some really difficult choices I poor choices I made for myself from a really
Yeah.
broken place.
Wow. My first thought was, you just don't know what people are going through. Like, we could have been in the same building and I didn't even know, and I can feel, um, just how you felt so much so.
Yeah. On a practical level, one of the things that I have you guys do is that centering prayer, the observer of your thoughts meditation. And so you can create 10 minutes a day for yourself. You set a timer, 10 minutes, you sit down, and the goal is not to think about nothing, but the goal is to stay
Yeah.
present. So when you're thinking about, oh, I can hear my dog licking her paws, or oh, I can hear the ceiling fan, or oh, you're connected to the senses around you. For me, when I'm doing this, I just really anchor into my breath and I just focus on breathing my breath. Breath is my focus point. It helps me stay in the moment. When I'm in a high stress situation, like maybe I'm having a hard conversation with somebody in my personal life and I can feel it they're starting to escalate and I can feel my nervous system going like, uh-oh, like fight or flight, right? Or appease or whatever. Then in that moment, I can feel it and I'll take a couple of deep breaths and keep myself in a parasympathetic state so that I can stay present. Breath work is really
Yeah.
powerful in this. And then every time you catch yourself having a thought, you remember this, right? You're having a thought of the future or a thought of the past, and you just observe it, you notice it, and then you let it go and you bring yourself back. You reconnect with your breath or you reconnect with some type of sensual experience in the room and then you do that 100 times in 10 minutes if you have to and you do that every day and little by little within a week you'll start to notice a difference. Within 3 months you'll start to really notice a difference. And it takes about 3 months to rewire parts of the brain. So it's just a
Yeah.
practice.
I think a really big shift in it for me was at the beginning, I thought, "I can't do this. I'm not doing," like, it's so much
Mhm.
judgment all over because I thought that I should do it letting go of that judgment, like, it is okay if you have to go back 100 times.
Yeah, I would say expect to
Yeah.
suck at it.
Yes.
Expect to just be a total failure. And for those who are listening, I'm saying failure with
Yeah.
quotation marks. Like, expect to be bad at it because you haven't been practicing presence. You're not just going to choose to be present and all of a sudden you're a present person. Like, we master and we perfect what we practice. If we've been practicing mindlessly scrolling and constantly thinking about the past and constantly thinking about the future, and we've diminished our ability to focus, and we've shrunk our attention span because of habits, habitual patterns in our lives. Well, we can restore the brain, we can redevelop those abilities, but it is going to demand practice. And it's easy to practice what's easy, and what's easy is to mindlessly scroll and think about whatever. But it's difficult to practice what's new. But eventually, and you can attest to this, it was difficult at first, but it becomes your new normal in time. And it's so
It
worth it.
is. And now I can feel the shift in myself when I haven't been doing it. So now it's almost reversed. I can feel, oh my gosh, I need to go down and be present because that's what brings me peace. That's what helps me get through my moments and be centered and reflect and focus and
So, what do you notice about yourself that's you telling on you? that you're not being present.
Disconnection? I could feel disconnection from myself and just kind of getting in that go mode. Um, Maybe frustration because I haven't sat back and assessed how I'm feeling about this one incident that happened. I just brushed it to the side. I haven't thought about it yet. Kind of that racing mind. It's the old patterns start creeping back, and I think
Mm.
once those aren't your normal patterns anymore, when they do come, it's amplified, that feeling of
Mm.
uncomfortability.
Yeah. You
Just
go ahead.
going back and making time for that present moment and just sitting with yourself and reflecting. It seems like just saying it in words, it doesn't sound that impactful, but it's so impactful. And maybe not much has changed, but it's changing something in yourself.
Yeah. This is why I started the whole series with the first point of stillness, because you start to cultivate everything else in that space of
Definitely.
stillness. Presence is cultivated initially in stillness, learning to be present within your own self, learning to calm down the scattered mind, learning to reconnect with the heart, because a lot of us are disconnected from our hearts. Maybe not fully disconnected, right? Because we don't talk about things in all or nothing, black or white terms here, but we pull away from our hearts. We pull away from our emotions when we don't know how to process what's going on inside of them. And we can callous ourselves a little bit. We can harden ourselves a little bit. And when we have that callous or when we have that hardened heart, that is disconnection. Our hearts are not open, our hearts are not tender. So we learn how to tenderize our hearts through stillness, and through presence, and so that's why I say you have to spend that time with you. You can live a life that you don't have to constantly check out from. But in order to be able to get there, it demands that you learn how to check in. And it starts from a place of stillness. And if all you can do for yourself right now is a centering prayer, which is learning to be the observer of your life, which is where I would actually recommend anybody start, then find a quiet room, get in a comfortable position. And for 10 minutes a day from now until the end of the year, or from now and for the next 2 weeks, just sit with your eyes closed in silence and pay attention to what's going on within you, your thoughts, where are your thoughts going? If it's anywhere other than the moment that you're in, let them go, come back to the present moment. If you have feelings that come up, don't judge them. We don't have to figure out our emotions. We just have to feel them. We don't have to let them control us. We don't have to take them out on people, but we can just feel them. And then the other thing I think that really helps is journaling, but a lot of women don't know how to journal, or they believe that they don't like journaling for lots of different reasons. And I think, again, that's where like Living Beautifully has so many guided prompts that you really learn how to ask your own self those types of questions. You learn how to journal. I'm working with a client right now, and she said, I've always been a journaler, but I would literally just regurgitate the same problems. It was like every journal entry was the same things, and I felt about it the same way. And then she's like, I started working with you, and now I'm doing distorted thinking log journals, and I'm doing my ESPM, my mindfulness journals, and I'm learning how to journal in a really proactive way that teaches me how to process things and move forward in life.
I remember I was not a journaler beforehand. I became a journaler, and at the beginning, it literally looked like I feel sad. Like it was so basic and so simple. And now I can remember with time and practice some of my most healing moments came out of my mind, and I wrote down and I looked and I would be in shock. It is such a healing practice, and it doesn't have to flow or look perfectly. Most people are never going to read it. It's just literally paper to get your thoughts out, and it develops over time.
Definitely. I love to say that journaling is like a mirror for the
Yeah.
soul. Journaling is that mirror that we're able to look at what's going on within ourselves, what's going on in our thoughts, what's going on in our emotions, and we can see what we're thinking about and how we're thinking about what we're thinking about. And then with the right tools, we can learn how to think about those things in a healthier, more optimized way. But I think you were a journaler. You just didn't know you were a journaler.
Yeah.
And that's the story for everyone. How many journals did you fill out while we were working together?
I'm on my third.
Third. Yeah. That's typical. I've had clients be like, "I've filled out 4 journals in 1.5 years working with you.
Yeah.
I've never written this much before," but they love it. They start to love it. And I'll say I'm 10 years into this journey. There were years where I journaled every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. Start my day off journaling and end my day off journaling. I've learned how to process life. Journaling served its purpose and it helped me grow in my self-awareness because self-awareness is developed through self-reflection. So I don't journal every single day anymore. But I do journal when I'm going through something difficult that I'm having a hard time processing through. So I'm not saying you have to journal every day for the rest of your life, but I'm saying journaling is a great way for you to learn about yourself and to learn how to process life instead of just push your way through
Mhm.
life.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up today, Claire, episode 2 of our 4-part Christmas series. I just want to say thank you for being here. This is fun.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I love what you added to the conversation. We talked about gratitude, we talked about simplicity, and we talked about presence. What would you suggest specifically before Christmas? It is hustle time. Presents have to be purchased, presents have to be wrapped, cookies
Yeah.
have to be baked. All these things have to get done. I'm using quotation marks again. What would some last bits of advice, maybe some practical things that she can consider implementing into her busy schedule?
Yeah. The first one, something that I'm working on, is not procrastinating, not putting something off, so you have to deal with it later, and just prioritizing maybe even 10 minutes for yourself to ask yourself, How am I doing? Am I doing okay? I have this big event next week. How do I want to show up to it? If I am feeling a little wigged out, how am I going to help myself in that moment? If I'm feeling very overwhelmed or I need to like help my kids with this or whatever it may be, how can I approach that? Um, yeah, just kind of stepping back and being with yourself. And it's almost like talking to yourself. And yeah, I think we can just easily rush through and plow through, and if you can just step back and have a little bit of, like, self-reflection and recognizing how you're feeling, then, yeah, it sounds small, but it can help so much.
Yeah. I would say gratitude, really practice that in every moment when you're feeling anxious or when you're feeling overwhelmed or when you're feeling those lower vibration emotions. Let that be an invitation in that moment for you to shift and not just force gratitude, not just grasp for gratitude, but really consider in that moment, what can I be grateful for? Maybe you're overwhelmed at all the presents to buy and wrap and trying to create this beautiful Christmas for your kids. And maybe that feels overwhelming. Maybe you're not feeling the joy in it this year. Well, maybe you can take some time in stillness to contemplate on what a gift it is that you have children to create these precious Christmas memories with. Not, Claire and we don't have kids. I don't have kids. I've always wanted kids. You're literally living my dream. Like, not to guilt or shame you, because I'm sure there's things about my life that you would like to have yourself, right? Where can you find gratitude in the things that maybe you're taking for granted, and not just force it or grasp for it, but really let yourself sit with it and contemplate on it until you start to feel it. And then simplicity, I would say, girl, not everything has to get done the way you think
Yeah.
it needs to. I still, I talked about on episode 1, Claire, how I wanted to put up this really cute little Christmas tree back here in the corner so that like I'd have a Christmas tree back here for this Christmas episode. And you know what? Because I value living a simple life, I was like, you know what? That does not need to get done. I have so many other things right now that feel like a priority. And having a Christmas tree in the background is not going to make or break this Christmas episode. Women are not going to be like, oh, but it would have been so much better. I would have remembered it so much more if she had that cute little Christmas tree in the back. It's not about the Christmas tree. So I let that go. I let that expectation go because I chose simplicity, because simplicity helps me show up present and I'm not overwhelmed and I'm not exhausted and I'm not depleted. And maybe the dishes get left in the sink a little longer than you want them to. No one's going to remember that. It's not going to make or break your holiday. Really take a look at the expectations and pressures and responsibilities that you're putting upon yourself, and ask yourself in moments of overwhelm or moments when you're feeling stretched, then what really matters right now? And then anything outside of that, practice letting
Yeah.
it go. Try to keep it simple. And then presence. Presence is the greatest gift you can give anyone. How Claire mentioned this. How do I want to show up for this? Not what do I need to get done for this? How do I want to show up? People are not going to remember what you ate or what you didn't eat, what you cooked, what you didn't cook, how clean your house was, that there was dust, but people will remember how they felt around you. So just be present, be intentional, be kind, be patient, try to take care of you so that you can show up from a place of overflow, not to be selfish, but to be loving to others. And if you can be mindful of these 3 things, in addition to the ones we talked about last week, which was stillness and needs and boundaries, then you're sure to have a much more enjoyable holiday season this year.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah. Well, if you guys haven't heard, I think Claire, you signed up for the Bible study, right, this
Yes.
year?
Yeah.
So Claire's gone through some of it because it's kind of like a go at your own pace thing. There's no pressure. You don't have to stay on task. There's a reading plan and you can read in it as quickly or as slowly as you want. But what what would you want her to know about it so far?
Yeah, it's, like, so well done, and you did such a good job, and it's so well thought out, and it helped me get the most far along I've ever been in the Bible, and because it was these formulated sections, I could really focus on it and not feel overwhelmed, and really I feel really proud of
Yeah.
myself, but I needed that
Good. You should
I
feel
needed
proud of
your
yourself.
guidance, your Bible study to get through it, so it's okay, it's help.
Yeah, and you can keep going. You
Yeah.
don't have to quit. So maybe you're like Claire, maybe you're listening today and you started the Bible study in January of 2024 and maybe you only got through a quarter of the year. Well, guess what? You can pick it up and keep going. Doesn't matter. It's a Bible study that you can jump in and join at any time. It's just guides you through the scriptures in 52 weeks. And next year, starting in January, we're taking this Bible study that I wouldn't even call it a Bible study. I would just call it like a Bible guide, but it's like a soulful journey through scripture because every week you're going to read a contemplation from me, a little commentary on where I highlight something that you're going to be reading through the scriptures in that specific week. And I make it more personal. I invite you into self reflection. I share from my own personal journey. I do give some teachings sometimes. I'll talk about the cultural context or I'll talk about the language. And I really like bring the scripture to life. I even talk about things in ways that you'll probably have never heard anybody talk about before. And then you also have 3 self-reflection prompts every week. The scriptures are not meant for us to just read through. They're meant to like, get inside of you and transform you from the inside out. But not everybody knows how to read through the Bible in that way. But in December, we're taking this Bible study and we're turning it into a spiritual formation group. So you will not only have your weekly commentary and daily reading plan, but once a month, we're going to be jumping on a virtual call together and we're going to do a 90-minute teaching and small group sharing. Beth and Mariah are going to jump in on that. Maybe Claire will too, if I twist her arm enough, and help facilitate small groups. And it's really going to be a focus on spiritual development. We're going to be talking about things like how do we practice rest? What about fasting? What about tithing? Like how do we grow and develop ourselves to become the kind of women that Jesus not only makes available for us to become, but actually commands us to become as we follow him. So it's going to be a culture of discipleship and it's going to be just part of your purchase of the study. It's going to be great. I'm feeling really excited about it because then we get to actually like be together in person, even though it's virtually, it's still going to be great. And then the other thing is the holding space. Claire, you signed
Yeah.
up for the holding space. Yeah. So that's another thing. That one's totally free, another 90 minutes. So you could literally be getting 3 hours of live virtual time with us every single month where we're actually like going deeper into all of this stuff and helping you learn how to integrate it into your life. So go to beautifulisalifestyle.com. It's the website. Go to resources page. And on that resources page, you'll find the holding space. You'll find the sacred pause and also one-on-one coaching. I mean, maybe you're listening and you're going, man, I want Tanya to be a sounding board in my life. I want to go through the mindfulness workbook and the distorted thinking log that they keep talking about. And like, I love learning about this, but I want to start integrating it into my life so I can start living in the fullness of freedom and in the wholeheartedness that these women have begun to cultivate in theirs. You can have it too. So you can just go to the website. There's an self-assessment that you can fill out there, and then we can figure out if working one-on-one together, if it's the right time or the right thing for you. So other than that, until next week, I hope you enjoy your week. I hope we have you here again with us next week. Claire, thank you so much for jumping
Yeah.
in last minute
Thank
and saving the
you.
day. Yeah, and we'll have you back again. I'm sure you can tell that she's lovely and wonderful and has so much wisdom to share from her journey and her story. She's such a kind-hearted and generous
Thank you.
soul, and the Living Beautifully community is so blessed to have you be a part of it. So,
Thank
thank
you.
you,
Oh, the
Claire,
feeling is so
and
mutual.
until next week, ciao for now.